Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lisette Coley, and I'm the Executive Director of Parapsychology Foundation. And on behalf of our Board of Trustees and our President, Mrs. Eileen Coley, I welcome you all here this evening to our perspective lecture. Tonight we're very pleased and very, very proud to have Dr. Kathy Dalton with us as our presenter. Early on in her career, she was a recipient of the Eileen J. Garrett Scholarship Award, and it's really nice to have backed a winner. So she has her BA in sociology from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. She received her MA in parapsychology from the John F. Kennedy University in Orinda, California, and her PhD in psychology from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Dr. Dalton is also a member of the Board of the Directors of the Parapsychological Association and a member of the Creative Problem Solving Institute. The focus of her research in recent years has been exploring the relationship between creativity and ESP, making use of a sensory deprivation technique known as the Ganzfeld, working with various creative populations. Dr. Dalton is a consultant on conducting successful Ganzfeld research for parapsychology laboratories worldwide, as well as creativity consulting on improving productivity in the workplace. So tonight she'll be discussing laboratory research that she's conducted and also that of others on the links between creativity and ESP. Dr. Dalton.
Well, I'm just delighted to be here tonight. It's my second visit to New York, and I find the city exciting and very cold at this point. What I want to talk about tonight is the different fields of creativity and ESP and how they are very interrelated and how both of those share similar characteristics and attributes and similar mind states in order to facilitate both creativity and psi. I'm going to need to start off with a few definitions to make sure that as I give my presentation that we all know what I'm talking about and what I mean when I use certain terms. You'll hear me say psi quite a lot. Psi is a general term for the areas of extrasensory perception, ESP, and also for the area of psychokinesis, which is basically mind over matter. The presentation tonight will focus on the area of extrasensory perception and how that relates to creativity. My overheads are fairly basic, and I'll explain this as we go along. For those of you who want headaches, I've included some statistics. For those of you who do not like headaches and statistics, then I'll just be talking about how it correlates to what you'd expect by chance and what we actually see in the laboratory. The next definition that I think we need to address before I can go any further is that of creativity. What does it mean when we say someone is creative, or that is a creative product or a creative item, or that people are creative? Well, first of all, let me state that in the field of creativity, it's generally understood that everyone is creative. We are all creative to some degree. We are creative in different ways. The ways that we express our own innate creativity is different for each one of us. The level and depth of our creativity is different. Some of us have a lot, we're born with it. Some of us have a little, and we develop it as we go through our lives. The ideal of what makes a creative object or item is basically that item or object or idea needs only to be unique and original to the person who generates that item, object, or idea. And that would be a definition of a creative object. So let's go ahead and have the first one here. Along the area of extrasensory perception, just a few more definitions, we have three primary areas. The first of that is telepathy, and that is mind-to-mind communication. Quite a lot of the research I'll be talking about tonight deals solely with telepathy. The next definition is that of clairvoyance, which is information gathering in the present time. The next is precognition, which would be your mind picking up on information on an object or an event in the future time. Now, when I say that the research is basically telepathy, we use that by design, by definition, because you cannot rule out the possibility that either one of these other two things are taking place. When there is a sender and a receiver, then you're saying that telepathy is taking place. But it's entirely possible that the receiver is picking up on that information from the TV set or the picture that the sender is looking at, and not necessarily from the mind of the sender. Also, they could be picking up the information from the future, from themselves. when they see the actual target, when the actual target is revealed to them, the identity. So they could be getting that information from themselves or even from when the experimenter later looks at the target and understands the information in that target. So while telepathy design is what we call it, you can't rule out either one of those other two areas. So one of the things that struck me when I started doing both psi and creativity, well, I got into it because I wanted to understand creative insight. What does it mean? What is the process of getting creative insight? And it struck me that creative insights and creative intuition was very similar to psi and extrasensory perception and telepathy and precognition and clairvoyance. So the first thing that I had to do was understand what is creativity. We've already defined that more or less as much as you can. And then the next thing for me was to find out, well, I understand what we know about the psychic profile, the psychic person. How would you define the creative person? Well, not very much to my surprise. The things that you say about the creative person are the same types of things that we find are true about someone who has a lot of psychic ability or who tends to be very good in laboratory psi research. They are curious, they're enterprising, they're sensitive, self-confident, tolerant of ambiguity, they take the initiative, they are persistent, they like a lot of variety and autonomy in their work. They do not like monotony, they don't like the same boring routine over and over. They like challenge, they're very independent both in their thoughts and in their actions, they're self-starting, they're self-directed, they're self-sufficient, they're good at redefining concepts and ideals and things, their environment and themselves. They are open to new experiences. They are generally non-conforming, and we're going to be talking about societal views in a minute, and you'll see why that's important. They're generally non-conforming, non-judgmental. They do not rush to judgment on things that they encounter in their lives, whether that be ideas or thoughts or concepts or people. They tend to be more in touch with their subconscious, very important. They have a tolerance for the unrealistic, which is always good when you're dealing with art. They are given to expression of their thoughts, their urges, their creative insights, rather than suppression. When they get something bizarre, they don't tend to suppress it and get rid of it. They're not afraid of it. They tend to bring that out into the light and look at it and say, this is unusual, this is different, let's explore this. And they also tend to have fuller access to their own experience because they do process the information coming from their subconscious, from the environment, and at a wider level, at a greater depth than non-creative folks. So now we've looked at the creative person. What is creativity and what is a creative person? Let's look at how society views creativity. I think you're going to find as I go through this talk tonight that when I say creativity, if you were to lift the word creativity out of the talk and substitute the word psi, it'd be the same thing. You'd be getting the same information, the same kinds of thoughts. So societal views of creativity. Well, the artist is outside the realm of expected societal behavior. And by that I mean they are not expected to be conforming. They're given license to be different. They're expected to be eccentric. They are expected to exhibit bizarre or erratic behavior. They are expected by society, by their cohorts, by their peers to be more open, accepting, inwardly focused, not dealing necessarily with their physical reality on an everyday, moment-to-moment basis, but to be inwardly focused and more in touch with their own subconscious mind. Therefore, they're more open to that material coming up. They have fewer filters, fewer veils, if you like, on the type of information that's coming through. They are also considered to be and expected to be more intuitive and thought to be more in touch with otherworldly or divine. This gives them kind of a special category. They're viewed as being very different from the rest of us and expected to be different. So what are the similarities that we can see between these two different fields in terms of state? And by state, I mean the kind of consciousness that you get into in order to facilitate psi and to facilitate creativity. Well, basically, when you're dealing with creativity, what we understand is that that creative impulse or the creative thought or idea, if you will, seems to come up from the subliminal, the unconscious, the subconscious, into conscious awareness, and then we act on it. This is the same thing that we believe of psi. That first, that psychic information comes through on a very weak signal through into the subconscious, the unconscious. And then as it flows into the conscious awareness, then we can act on it, recognize it, and deal with it. We feel that both of these are facilitated by altered states, that both of these things are elusive. They tend to be very intuitive. So what does that mean for creativity and for psi? Well, it means that they get these flashes, these insights, and suddenly they have the answer, or they get information that we can't figure out how they would otherwise come by with the known five senses. So they're considered to be very intuitive. Both of these states need positive motivation. I need the psi information in order to avoid the crisis. I need the artistic impulse in order to fulfill myself, to fulfill my potential, in order to express myself. Both of these need a certain kind of relaxation, one that is not necessarily asleep, but one that is more focused and here and open and receptive. And also, both states tend to be a bit dissociative. And by dissociative, I mean, again, they're not necessarily in total contact with reality. They're kind of unfocused, and they're kind of just allowing things to happen for them rather than being really focused intently on any given goal or object in the environment. The creative and psi state is considered to be almost trance-like. Do I have a lot of artists and creative folks in here tonight? Okay. I would by definition not call myself very creative. I have a mother and two sisters who are becoming very well known for their art. I draw a very shaky stick figure, okay, but I do woodwork, and I find my expression that way. And all the artists that I've talked with and had conversations with, I've asked them about, well, what does this mean when you say to me that the creative state is trance-like? Do you mean that you like check out and you channel, or what do you mean? And what they tell me is that when they're immersed in their art, and that is their focus, when they're doing the creative thing, that they're unaware of their surroundings. The moon could fall from the sky, they'd never know. All they know is their art and that flow of the creative urge. And we get this same kind of description from, I've just lost my pen. Same kind of description from very gifted sensitives and psychics in the lab. This is the kind of state that they go in where they're facilitating the information coming up from the subliminal subconscious and into conscious awareness. For them, that is all there is. There is nothing else. Both states tend to come first from the unconscious as we understand it. These states tend to be imagery filled, and I say tend to be because I do realize that we all process information in different ways, and we express that information to ourselves in different ways. Most of us are visually oriented, so we get our information in mental visual images. Some people hear sounds. Musicians hear the music. Sometimes they'll see colors associated with that music and fluctuations in light. But for the most part, they tend to hear things. Some of us are very kinesthetic. We really have to close our eyes and get into the clay or whatever it is. For the most part, these two states tend to share this particular attribute in terms of being imagery filled. Again, they are unaware and yet absorb. This relates back to the trance-like state. And these two different areas all report that when they're engaged in understanding the psi information or their art, they are focused here, what's going on in here, what they're processing, what they're doing, and yet they're also very open, in a sense, either their spirit or their minds, or as a channel to facilitate and produce that information. So let's look at the things that we know facilitate both states. This is something that we've used both in psi research and in the creative world to a certain extent to produce and facilitate both of these urges, the psychic urge and the creative urge. Physical relaxation. If you're stressed out, if you're so tense you can't see straight, obviously you're not going to do well at your art, and you're not going to do well at understanding and getting psychic information. And that's when you start running into creative blocks or psychic blocks. We tend to look for reduced sensory processing. By that, I don't mean sensory things are happening in here, but you reduce the information that you're bombarded with by your environment. All these things that we process every minute, how warm it is, how light it is, how many people are in the room with us, the sounds of scuffle in the back of the room, coughing, sneezing, all of that, that's tuned out. You're only processing what's going on internally, not externally. Deployment of attention toward internal processes relates directly to that. You're focused inward. Holistic, non-analytical processing. You're not thinking, oh, I just had an image of a horse. Well, I had that horse because, well, I saw a horse this morning, and I like the horse, and my daughter wants a horse, and so I have to get a horse for Christmas. You're not thinking that. You're thinking horse, grace, flow, wind in the hair and the mane, the galloping muscles, that kind of thing. So it's non-analytical. It's just there for you. You don't rationalize it. You don't analyze it. You just let it happen. And what we then need is sufficient cortical arousal to sustain consciousness in the absence of this pattern perceptual input from our environment. And by that I mean, if you get too relaxed, you go to sleep. So you need to be relaxed, but you need to be stimulated either by the creative urge or by the information that you're getting psychically from the subconscious. So since we know that that is the kind of thing that facilitates psi, very much so, then, and we know that are very similar states for creativity, what kind of thing could we develop to facilitate this? At this point, I should say that the technique that I'm going to discuss tonight, called the Gonfeld, is one that was developed in our field, was brought in from psychology and adapted for use in our field because it incorporates all of those things. And it was also used in research very early on. Well, it grew out of that research. Very early research with teams of artists, musicians, people who consider themselves to be very creative. And what we found is that any time we dealt with a creative population, whether one or two in a pair, they tended to do very well in the research. Early on, basically we just said, oh, that's nice. Next. And we didn't pay too much attention to it. But recently, in the last decade or so, we have had a technique that has allowed us to really explore both the areas of creativity inside. This technique is called the Gonfeld. The Gonfeld is a German term. It literally translates into whole and filled. It is a sensory isolation technique. It makes use of all things we just discussed to put people into a state where both the creative urge and psi can be facilitated. It's a free response procedure, and by that I mean that the target material that we use can be anything. It can be a video clip, it can be an art print, it can be an object on the other side of the world. It can be anything. There is no fixed idea of what the target is. It can be anything. The Gonfeld facilitates alterations of consciousness. What we do is basically have you relax in a reclining chair, you wear eye shields that cuts down on the visual input, and headphones that cuts down on auditory input. So basically you're cut off from your environment. Not so much that your anchors to reality are totally removed, but just enough that you're not being bombarded by the information you have to process every second. So we reduce all of that noise for you, and it helps you turn inward and focus on what's coming through to you internally. And finally, it facilitates mental visual imagery. We do this basically by having a red light on in the room. The red light, which shines on the eye shield, produces kind of a red fog. If you've ever been in a fog and stared at it or a cloud long enough, you start seeing shapes in there, and your eyes are being told you're seeing something because the red light stimulates the rods and cones in the eyes. So your brain is hearing, you're seeing something, and you're staring at this red fog. And basically, in the Gonfeld, you have a focus. It's a passive focus, but you have a focus. And the focus is, what is the information that's being shown in the other room? What is the target? Is it a video clip? Is it a horse? Is it a tree? Is it an object? What is it? And so your mind very obligingly seems to throw out imagery related to this particular target, because that's what you've asked it to do. And again, any act of striving, like the art of creation, if you actively really focus very hard on it, you get in your own way. You're trying so hard that you're blocking yourself. So this passive focus is very important. You have to just ask and then let it happen for yourself. Let your mind and your body operate together to make it happen. So Gonfeld telepathy experiment typically flows as follows. The receiver, and there's usually a sender-receiver pair. The receiver comes in, and they are isolated from the sender. They are taken into another room, a room that is usually shielded. It's acoustically very quiet. It's as far as we can, get them isolated from all the information coming from the outside. The receiver is exposed to conditions of sensory deprivation, and then they're asked to free associate in relation to the target that the sender is looking at. Free association says that while you're seeing those pretty pictures in the fog, tell me what you see. What are you getting in there? Since you're kind of asking for the information about the target, what's coming in there? Whatever pops in your mind, thoughts, feelings, images, whatever. Tell me what's going on, let it go, and see what else comes up for you. So they're asked to free associate. This guy is saying, I'm getting green, I'm getting small, I'm getting animal. So while we have our receivers in there, looking at our free associating, we have the sender in another room, sometimes in another building. The sender is looking at an object, an art print, or a clip, and they look at this repeatedly. If they're able, they touch it, they experience it, they feel it, they try to become it. In this case, he tried to be a turtle. So he attempts to mentally transmit this target information to the receiver. After the receiver has finished his free association, and it takes about 20 minutes, half an hour, they're shown 4 possible targets.
Sender knows who the receiver is?
Yes. In my research, they are generally accomplished. And I will tell you a little bit more why that's important a little bit later. We use a target of 4, and here's where a little bit of statistics come in. I'm sorry if you get a headache. They look at 4 possible targets. On the basis of the imagery that they were coming up with during the free association period, they will select one of these, and they will rank them. Let's say they rank them first choice, second choice, third choice, and then fourth choice. So they go 1, 2, 3, 4 in order of preference. The data is recorded. Most of our systems are automated now, so the computer takes care of everything. Selection and generation of the target to the sender, recording of the data, and playback of the actual target. So the experimenter never knows what the target is until the receiver finds out. And then feedback is given. Chance, which means that if I just guess and go, I think it's this one, chance is 25 because we're dealing with 4 targets here, so it's 1 out of 4, 25. The very first place that this was developed did not use creative folks. They worked with the general population, psychophysical research laboratories. They developed the automated Donsfeld. We had 8 different experimenters, 240 participants, da-da-da-da-da. Now, chances is 25%. And what we saw with the general population off the street was approximately a 34% hit rate. That is significant by scientific analysis, which means that what we think is not happening is that it was not chance, that this was due to something else. In this case, we suspect size. So that's a very strong hit rate, and we were all very happy with the result. Now, what they did when they went back and looked at their data was to come up with 4 things that said these kind of people tend to do very well in psi research. For that laboratory, we looked at prior psi experiences. Folks who came in and said, I have had a psi experience, I've had a precognitive dream, I've had a telepathic episode where I picked up the thoughts of someone else, I knew who was on the phone before it rang, I made a spoon bin, whatever. If they had a prior psi experience and they came into the lab, they tended to do better in the laboratory research. Also, those folks who were able to take part in laboratory research prior to the Donsfeld tended to do very well. My feeling is that's a psychological effect in that they were very comfortable with the lab, therefore they were able to relax the barriers, relax any concerns, and go better with the flow. The practice of a mental discipline. This one we found to be very consistent. By that I mean people who practice meditation, biofeedback, forms of martial arts in which it is required that you do a certain amount of mental discipline to maintain your level. Those folks, because they're more familiar with their mind, they tend to do better in psi research. And those folks who found themselves typed as feeling perceptive on the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which is a personality assessment. Feeling perceptive makes perfect sense because you're more in touch with your intuitions and your perceptions. So all of these seem to be very straightforward. Because they had done so well and this technique worked so good with the general population, we were very intrigued with it. So one of the researchers in the field by the name of Marilyn Schlitz said, well, What happens if I build on that past early research that said, artists are very good in our research. So let's do a whole study looking just at artists, and what will we find? Well, she went to the Juilliard School of Performing Arts, and she worked with musicians, drama, and dancers. All right. Well, chance is 25%, don't forget. What she found was an overall 50% hit rate. That's double what you'd expect by chance. Hooray, that was wonderful, that was excellent. Well, then they got looking at the data, and what did they find? Musicians. Musicians had a 75% hit rate. 3 what you'd expect by chance. How many musicians do I have in here tonight? Anybody? If you raise your hand, you have to go home with me, so. Anybody? Next, they found that the drama students, the actors, did very well with a 40% hit rate. They only had 2 dancers in the study, so I don't think it's a fair assessment. But both dancers missed their target, so they had a 0 hit rate. But again, what was most astonishing for us was this right here, musicians. We didn't expect this. How many musicians? Oh, I think it was, let's see, 2? 14. So a small study, basically. Now, I've been very, very intrigued with the Gonsfeld, and I actually went to the original convention where Marilyn's work was presented, and I watched her presentation. I said, I got to do that. That's for me. I love creativity. I have to work with those folks, and this is the technique that seems to be most facilitative and will help us understand what those links are, because they are there. So why do creative folks do so much better in the lab? What are they doing when they're hitting so much higher than the general population? Well, I wound up going over to the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, where I got my PhD. And along with a few others, we came up with an automated Gonsfeld system for our use there. It's a free response system. We were very concerned with security because we were using sender-receiver pairs, and they were isolated from each other in different areas of the building. But we were very concerned that what we were seeing was actual psi and not some artifact of the system or some kind of sophisticated queuing system. So we involved security experts and magicians who, if anybody can do fraud, they can, in the design, so we could circumvent some of those concerns. So we used a very sophisticated methodology and protocol with a high level of security measure. The very first person there before we got done, the young lady who was being trained there, beautiful young lady, Irish lass, red hair, creamy skin. Oh, she was just terribly disgusting, but I tell you what, she never had any problems getting participants in. No problem at all. They did tend to be mostly young men, but she got participants. She pre-selected for musical talent. She used pairs of musicians, and for psi belief, and for extroversion, because we had seen some research that said extroverts tend to do better in laboratory research. I think this is an artifact. The reason I think that is that extroverts tend to like social circumstances. They like social situations. They want to be out talking and being stimulated by the people around them. Introverts do not. They prefer one-on-one tasks. They don't like social situations. So they may have found the Gonsfeld, which is a very social situation, because you interact with the exposure quite a lot. You're in a room, you can't see, and you're asked to speak out loud to someone about anything that comes into your mind. So my suspicion is that introverts were finding laboratory research just not as comfortable for them psychologically as our extroverts. But this is her criteria. She got 16 pairs of musicians, and again, she was only using pairs, no singles. Sorry for the statistics. You can ignore the bottom two. I just want you to focus on the hit rate there. So she had 32 trials with 13 hits. She had a hit rate of 41%. Not bad. Not bad at all for musicians. Part of the things she did not do was to use very much musical targets, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. As you can see down here, this little add-in right here, the meditators who are musicians did significantly better than anyone else. And again, that's very important because meditators seem to be more conversant with the way their mind works. They know what's noise, and they know how to quiet the noise, and therefore they're probably better able to recognize the psi signal when it pops up for them. mostly, as for musicians, mostly friends. And they were all musicians, and she knew they were musicians, but they were not necessarily professional musicians. By that, I mean, they may not have been in school to be a musician, they may not have earned their living by being a musician, and they may not have had any formal credentials as a musician. What I wanted to do was to look at something that was a bit more formal. So I decided to work with not just musicians, but with 4 different creative groups. The reason being, I felt that we hadn't really expanded our information base enough to know, is it just musicians? What about visual artists? What about fiction writers? What about not drama students per se, but any actors? Would it matter if they're a comedian? What kinds of things would we see if we looked at the different groups? So I started working with professional and semi-professional musicians, artists, actors, and writers, and I used 32, 4 different groups, 32 in each group. My hypothesis about the artists, I used just visual artists, okay? My hypothesis, because of my sisters and my mom, my hypothesis was that the visual artists would do just as good as those musicians, absolutely. I did some pre-selection, by the way, and I pre-selected on the basis of creative ability, artistic creative ability, a positive attitude towards sight, yes, I believe that sight exists, and spontaneous sight experiences, and the practice of a mental discipline. When I say artistic creative ability, these poor folks were so good to me, I gave them test after test after test of creative ability, starting with the Torrance test of creative theory and thinking, and going down through the Guilford test, the structure of intellect, to tell me what you think. Are you creative on a scale of 1 to 10? Are you a Van Gogh, or are you like me and can't do a straight stick figure? What's your own level? So I gave them 2 hours worth of tests, creativity tests, before they ever got into the Gonzo. And they were all very patient with me and just did excellent. So what did I find for my creative folks? Well, my musicians beat everybody. Again, they had a 56% hit rate. Again, more than double what you'd expect by chance alone. My artists came in right behind them at 50, so they were trying to, keep up with the musicians. But I have to give them credit for doing just that little bit much better. So my artists were exactly at double that you'd expect by chance. So what about the other 2 groups? My actors and my writers. They did exactly the same. Which was a little bit surprising because I expected one or the other to come out ahead. And they had a 41% hit rate. Not as good as the other 2, but again, not shabby by any means. And I have to admit that I was very, when I looked at the creativity results, I expected in these 4 groups to find some indicator within the creativity test that would say, this is the facet of creativity that is directly linked to sign. If you look for people who have this attribute, then you will have found the psychic personality. And then we can start understanding the process of sign. We can understand how it works, what to look for, how to facilitate it, how to use it, how to apply it in everyday life. Well, they didn't do that. No, they didn't do that. What I actually found is that while musicians tend to do very well in, say, fluency, writers did very well in originality, actors did very well in elaboration, and then the visual artists did entirely great in another realm. And then they all flunked in the other 3 areas. Or they did really well in one test, one group did, and the other 3 groups just didn't do. And so it was very, very confusing, very conflictive. Probably the good thing that came out of this was that we made some insights as to why musicians might be a little bit better than the rest of the group. By the way, just for those who are interested in what happens if you combine all 4 groups and you're looking just at the set results, not at the creativity results, then for 128 trials with 60 hits, it's a hit rate of about 47%. This replicates what Marilyn Schlitz found and what Stephanie also found, and that's good. Replication in science is always a good indicator that you're actually looking at a real effect rather than something that's just a one-off. So when we look at those four groups and we start speculating on why one group did well and one did not, one of the things that really jumped out is, and when I say us, I mean I went to all the other researchers who had been looking at creativity inside and said, such and such information is not in your paper, and I need to know about these trends and patterns. If you can't tell me about what the data says, then tell me about your own observations. And what we actually found within both those areas was that visual artists and musicians tended to get very accurate imagery. They were less vague, they were less undefined, and they tended to get more specific imagery in relation to the target. But when it came time to judge, when it came time to look at these four and make the connection between the imagery that you were getting and the thing that you're seeing on the TV screen right now, the musicians were able to make the transition from intuitive and irrational to rational and analytical. They were the better judges. Not necessarily were they getting better psi information, but they were the better judges. That transition was easier for them. My artists and the other groups would actually agonize for a long time over what the correspondences were, what the symbols were, what the images might be. And they would go back and forth and really kind of confuse themselves as to how things that they were getting in terms of their imagery related to things they were seeing on the screen. The musicians were like, okay, this and this and this and this and this. So it's this one. And they were therefore the better judges. This makes very much sense to me because of the formal training that musicians get. They are all their life trained to look at something on a page, take it in here, make it into creative resonance, creative urges to, and then to take that around, what they're hearing in their heads or what they're seeing, to take that out of their minds and into the physical reality, to make what is coming through inside of them real for the people around them. So they're always taking the irrational into the rational realm. That is something that they do on a consistent basis. The early formal training seems to set up some areas of their brain to be structured to deal with the transition from the irrational to the rational. So that is basically the theory on why musicians do so much better in terms of being judges. Not that they're necessarily more psychic, although we can't conclusively rule that out yet, but just that they make that transition so much easier in terms of the judging process.
Can I ask you a question on the methodology? Questions okay?
Would you mind waiting until we get a little bit closer? I'm almost done. Okay. One of the things I'd like to just put out now, and these can also be for the discussion in just a minute, is that we have found certain factors in our research in terms of things that seem to enhance psi in the laboratory. One of those is, of course, creativity, which I very humbly put way down the bottom, but which in my estimate should go a little bit higher. The things that we've found consistently in the laboratory research and that we look for in folks who come in to take part in laboratory research is, first and foremost, the belief that psi exists. By this, I don't mean that you have to be a true believer. I mean that you have to be open-minded. You have to say, I think there's a possibility that we're capable of more than we currently know. That we do have possibly the potential to pick up on things that aren't readily apparent to our known five senses. Next, that if you've had past experiences that you think involve psi, that you feel were psychic, it's a good indicator that you're going to do better in the laboratory. This may be because when you had that psi experience, you had the psi information come through subconsciously or whatever into the conscious awareness. So you've experienced that signal once before, so when you're in the laboratory and you're getting that information again, you're like, there's a sense of familiarity about it. Oh, that's what it is. So you may be a little bit better, again, to recognize the information that's coming through. Past performance and psi experiences, not necessarily in the same experiment that you're in, but in other experiments. And again, that has to do with psychological comfort with what you're going through. Practice with mental disciplines, absolutely. If you really wanted to improve your mind, improve yourself, improve both your creative talent and any other talents that you might have in terms of psi or otherwise, practice meditation. Practice getting to know your own mind and how it works. Biologically close relationship. I want to talk a little bit more about that. My sender-receiver teams were exclusively friends or relatives. When people said, I want to be in your study, but who do I bring as a sender? Do you give me someone? I said, bring someone that you feel you have a rapport with. We have done studies in which we've used senders who are not related. We use staff senders, or we just use people that, anybody that we could drag in as a sender. What we found very clearly was that people who had senders that they felt they had a rapport with or that they were friends with did much better. Again, my feeling here is that it's that psychological comfort. When you come in with a friend, it's an adventure, it's a kick, it's a fun thing. If you come in and you have a lab sender, someone you've never met before, your barriers may go up because you may feel that, well, the stranger is trying to send me information to my mind. I'm not comfortable with that, so I'm going to block whatever's going on there. So we've consistently found that people who bring in friends or family do much better. We've also found a fairly strong relationship when that relationship is biological or genetic. And I want to talk more about the research surrounding that in just a minute. Experimental rapport, if the person that you're dealing with when you come into the lab is friendly and warm, then obviously you're going to do better than if you come in and they say, all right, lab rat, over there, sit down, get ready, get this right. Who wants to deal with that? So obviously experimental rapport is a factor here for us in our research. And of course, creativity. You can't get away from that. Other considerations when you're looking at what facilitates science in the laboratory would be what kind of target material you're dealing with, whether it's engaging, whether it's important to you that you get it, whether it's something that you want to deal with, not something that might be really violent or really unpleasant, but the target material, the kind that is visually intriguing, has some sort of emotional charge, and something that you're willing to allow your mind to be open and receptive to. And experienced participants are, again, people who do much better. Number of sessions and gender effects and telepathy. My initial thought here was that female-female teams would do really well in the research because I've always heard of women's intuition. So my theory was that women would do very well in my research. Well, surprise. The best sender-receiver teams are, can anybody guess? Male receiving, female sending. That's the best combination. The next best combination is female receiving and male sending. The mixed gender teams do best. Third would be female-female, and the absolute worst, male-male. And I think that has more to do with society and enculturation and a feeling of uncomfortable with having another male listen to what your private thoughts are, free association, and knowing that they're listening. So if you're looking to facilitate that in the laboratory, mixed gender pairs do much better. This also reinforces what we know in terms of social situations and problem solving within the social sciences. And this is an effect that they find consistently when they put together pairs to attack a problem. Mixed gender pairs work together better, they're more cooperative, and they get to the solution much quicker. And you can consider a side task within the laboratory a problem-solving approach. What is the target? So people who are high performers for us, what kinds of things would we attribute to high performers? That would be a high level of confidence. If you know in your heart and mind that you're good at this and you're going to do it, then you probably will. But if you come in and you're not sure and you don't think you can, that I don't think I can, then you probably won't. It's really up to you and what you will allow yourself to be and to do. Personal side experience, again, psychologically high functioning, and by that we mean basically if you're not neurotic or psychotic or everything, but that you're very stable and that you're very comfortable with yourself. That's the most important thing, that you be very comfortable with yourself. And again, the highly creative folks, especially musicians, formal training seems to be very facilitative for picking up the information in the lab. Intelligent, and by that I mean average intelligence. You don't have to be a genius to do the average intelligence, basically so you can understand the task that you're going through and what is going to be expected. Non-judgmental, open-minded, willing to let possibilities flow. And I think some of those attributes are things that are associated with creative folks. The high level of confidence, the basically fairly stable and psychological functioning. They tend to be intelligent. They tend to be non-judgmental. They tend to be risk takers. They tend to be unconcerned with others' opinions. they're successful at careers that value intuition, such as being an artist. And they are very much into their own hunches and their own insights and their own intuitive ideas about what art is and what it means to them. Okay, other psychological factors, again, both for psi and for creativity. What is your motivation for doing this? Is it healthy for you? The kind of environment that it takes place in terms of testing for psi or the creativity environment. A release of effort, again, giving up that striving, that forcing. A success is associated with effortless striving, both in creativity, as I understand it, and in the laboratory. And at the same time, you have to have a goal. I want to express this thought, feeling, urge. I want to get the target. I want to take my creative urge and express myself to reach my own potential. And we're finding for psi information that the information concerning shape, form, color tends to be a bit more accurate for us than really being analytical and trying to come up with very hardcore specifics. Okay, when you finished. Let's talk a little bit about the biological link. As I told you, we've looked at our research in terms of biologically linked pairs, parents and child and siblings. The original database that I talked to you about, Psychophysical Research Laboratories, when they went back and looked at just those pairs alone in that large database, they found that these pairings had a 60% hit rate. The Ryan Research Center, who was also doing Otto Gonsfeld research, went back and looked at their database. They had a 62% hit rate. When I went back and looked at my creativity study, I found a 66% hit rate. So obviously there's something going on there, because that's nearly as high as what you're seeing with just musicians who are getting like 50 and 75% hit rates. So that biological link there, it does seem to be important. There seems to be something going on. So the next question in people's minds concerning the biological link is it genetic, or is it nature versus nurture? Is it enculturation? Is it genetics? So the next step, of course, would be to look at the biological link with using biologically linked pairs. See what kind of results you get with that. Follow up that study with adopted families and see if you get the same kind of results. And that should give you some insight as to whether it's enculturation or genetics. Current creativity research going on in the field has been making quite a lot of use of the Gonsfeld. The more current studies I know of is one that I've been involved in at Stanford University in California, working with musicians and EEG recordings. Because what we're looking for here is a brain signature. What's going on in their minds when they're getting the psi information? Is there something very specific about the way their brains react to the psi information? At the Ryan Research Center, we're looking at musicians and artists and LST, which is local sidereal time, which basically means we have found a relationship between, how to explain this? We were looking at relationships between geomagnetic fields. We were finding a relationship there in terms of when the Earth's geomagnetic field is quiet, people tend to do better in psi research. When it's very active and very noisy, they tend to do not as well. So we took that one step further and we looked at things like solar radiation, solar flares, the influence of large celestial bodies on the Earth. And what we found, for example, is that in local sidereal time, when the Milky Way is right overhead, the Earth is noisy. And psi doesn't work very well. When it's below the horizon and not influencing the sphere, psi is better. It's quieter. This is an effect that we've looked at in databases dealing with ESP and with psychokinesis, and we found this effect consistently in databases here in the US, in the UK, in the South Americas. Anywhere the psi research is being done, this effect is popping up in both areas.
Is that a specific time of year, or?
It's a specific time of day.
Yeah.
For example, local sidereal time, if you want to do something that's likely to be successful, you do it at 13.5 local sidereal time. 1800 is when it's a trough. Don't ever do anything then because it won't work. Okay, that was actually the last slide I have. So I'll entertain questions now, and we talk a little bit more about creativity in psi research and how and why those things interact.
I'm interested in methodology to be able to analyze what you did in my own mind. the sender knows the receiver, and the sender takes the picture?
No. The sender and receiver are acquainted because we have found out that facilitates. Our systems are automated, which means they are under computer control. We use real random devices such as electronic noise. The computer sends out, it samples the electronic noise, so it gets a 1 or a 0, and that corresponds to a number. The computer has over 100 different possible targets. It goes out and selects that number target from that particular pool. And that's done when the computer is initiated. All right, so only the computer knows. Once you start the computer and it's all automated, the experimenter doesn't do anything but write down what the receiver says when they're talking out loud, when they're free associating. So the computer selects the target randomly, and it's the only one that knows until feedback is given to the receiver.
So the computer tells the sender which picture to think about?
It shows it to them on a TV screen in their room. The sender is sent into another part of the building, and they're in the room with a TV set. The TV set is automatically turned on. The computer shows this 1-minute video clip repeatedly, over and over, giving the sender, time to look at it, immerse themselves in it. It goes down, rewinds, and shows again. So it's over and over during a half hour that the receiver is in the other room.
Did you ever do like a control group and have the computer send a message to see if it's different?
We have done studies where there's no one in the room, but the target is still shown. I actually, if you would permit me to just show you 2 more slides. We did a study looking at, we did a study looking at the biological effect of senders versus no senders. And again, this was at Edinburgh. And we used a creative population because I was part of it. I said, we want to use these folks. What we found here was we had 3 conditions. And of these conditions, the PRL condition that you see up there means that there was a sender. Everybody knew there was a sender. And at all times there was a sender in the room. The no sender condition meant that when the participant came in, they were told, you're taking part in a study in which we're looking at the effects of sender. There may or may not be a sender in the room. If there is a sender, it is, for example, Caroline, who is on staff. And please sit down and have a talk with Caroline. You guys talk about how you might like her to send it to you if she is in the room. The computer will make that designation after we start the session. No one will know until the end of it. So Caroline might go down to the room, and if it's a no sender condition, she sits down, the TV comes up and says, go away now. So she would leave and go to her office and lock herself in. Meantime, the receiver is asked to free associate and try to pick up information about the target. At the end of that, they do the judging, they get feedback, and that's when we find out not only what the target was, but whether there was a sender or not. In the sender condition, Caroline went down, and the computer said, please stay and send. And she stayed, and the whole process went the same. Found out what the target was, and then found out whether there was a sender or not. And what we found, overall we found that we had basically the same kind of thing that you get for a general population, 33%, which is very comparable to the 34 that PRL had. So we were basically very happy with that. This creative population, I should add here, were just people who walked in and I said, are you creative? Do you consider to be creative? And they would say yes or no. Okay? And then I would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, are you Van Gogh or are you me? And then they would say, whatever. So this was not a bad result. We were very happy with it. Let's look at what happened by the condition. We had 32 trials in each condition. For the PRL, we had, in which they knew there was a sender. So they expected somebody to be down there sending. The PRL results were a little bit higher than the other 2, just by 1 hit. In the sender condition, we had 10 hits. In the no sender condition, we had 10 hits. So what does this tell us? Well, basically it tells us that apparently there's no difference between the 3 conditions. That when you know there's a sender down there, you do maybe slightly better. Keep in mind here 2 things. One is that we were using only staff. So you came in and you were introduced to a stranger who'd be down there sending you information. We didn't know how else to do this and keep the security as high as we needed to be to look at the effect. We also didn't want receivers coming in expecting to have a good time and being told, go away now. So this way we lowered the disappointment rate, and we also raised our security measures. The other thing is that this was a very small study, 96 trials. That's small by our standards. What you need to really look at this effect is trials in the hundreds to look at this effect and see then what kind of response rate we get. Anytime time we found in God's research that you use a known sender, someone that you have a rapport with, results are better. We know that from PRL through current day. Does that help address that question? Any other questions? I should say right now that when I went into the lab originally, I was very much the scientist. I was very much the hardcore skeptic. Okay, let's see what's here. Yeah, one's intuition, other's intuition. Let me check this out. Fascinated with creativity and creative insights and creative intuition. Wanted to explore that process. Wanted to know what was going on. But basically felt that, this is interesting. Let's see what happens. I've been doing this for about years, and I am now a believer. And the reason I'm a believer is two things. First of all, if you have any doubts about this, please look at our statistical database. Go and just look at what our statistics are saying worldwide, not just in one lab, but worldwide, different labs, different experimenters. Look at the size and the extent of that database. Our results are better than, I have to admit, most of the hard sciences out there. Our effect sizes are higher than some of the things that they base reality on in terms of medications prescribed, that kind of thing. So if you have any questions at all about the reality of this, please just look at statistics. If you don't want to do that, be an experimenter. Because at this point, I've seen enough and encountered enough in the lab that I still occasionally get chills. How could that be? How could this person know that? So for me, at this point, in addition to the statistics, it's experiences that I've had in the lab and the people that I've encountered who I truly feel are gifted. Not everybody, because creativity and psi tend to be distributed in the general population along a general normal curve. So you have people who have a little bit of creativity and a little bit of psi, and you have people at the other end who are born with a lot of creativity and a lot of psi. And it's those people that really just boggle the mind. Questions? What do you think? Poor stuff, wasn't it? Heroin.
Well, you spoke a lot about creativity and psychic ability, and in this particular type of study, the targets are all visual. You didn't mention anything about the right hemisphere, and I wonder, do you think there is a link to the right hemisphere particularly? Or?
Well, in my explorations into the creativity literature, they seem to feel that while the right hemisphere is traditionally viewed as the creative hemisphere, that, for example, what we see with musicians when we have been able to look at brain scans and EEG reports and stuff like that, is that they make use of both hemispheres. And it's the facilitation for the judging and the rational and irrational is that passing back and forth of information between the two hemispheres. So, does that answer your question?
Do you look at whether your subjects are left or right-handed?
I have not done that. I do have that data, but I have not done that. Mostly because it is not necessarily, first of all, it's not true that left-handed people are more creative. As far as we can tell in terms of the creativity assessments and tests that left-handed people have completed in addition to right-handed people. So that kind of, I thought, doesn't have any basis as far as we can tell in creativity research. But I don't get a whole lot of left-handeds, as many as I get right-handed. So they're kind of a small subpopulation. Yes.
These clips, but I recognize Bugs Bunny.
Yes.
They're from movies or?
Movies, cartoons, documentaries. I have a lot of David Attenborough, my favorite. So a little bit of everything. I've got stills. I've got black and whites. I've got a thing on the Beatles where it's just flashes of pictures and a lot of music. One of the things I wanted to look at was, would musicians respond better to music? I did not find any correlation between the clips with music, how well they did on those versus clips that just had special effects or voices talking or whatever. They all had some soundtrack though, every clip did.
Do people get music?
They do hear music. I had one woman, she picked up, it was hysterical because it shows you how the symbols and how people get things, rationalize it, and then find out how it relates to the clip. She kept getting Jack, in an old movie, and I don't know what role he played, but Jack Nicholson going up the side of this cliff, it was black and white, and the clip clop of the horse's hooves. The clip I was using was something called Tennis Slow Ball from The Witches of Eastwick, where they're playing the tennis and it's going bop, 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 and it sounds like clip, 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 and Jack Nicholson's in it. So as soon as she saw that, she said, that's it, and that's the sound I kept hearing.
Uh-huh.
I'll take somebody else first.
With these participants, did you reuse them? And were they constantly, or is this a one-time shot?
Well, they're all one-time shots. And one security thing, because the more familiar they are with the protocol, then they might be able to concoct some way around it. But also because what I was looking was to only deal with novices, people who were freshly exposed to this kind of technique, and see how well it did to those. We do know that people who are more comfortable with this technique, because it's kind of strange, red lights, the eye shields are half ping pong balls. I mean, we're talking high tech here. So it's a little bizarre for people the first time around, but we do know that when you use experienced participants, your hit rate goes up. That would have been a next study for me at Edinburgh, but time and funding ran out at the same time, so I did not go further with experienced people.
You know who these people are? I mean, it seems to me some of these people would be interesting to talk to.
To follow up on
other
them.
experiments.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, we all share participants over there. We get people who say, we always say, would they sign a consent form that we can use their data and stuff, and we always say, would you be interested in participating in another research here? Because I know this study and this study and this study, and you know, we'd love to be able to involve you in as much as we can. So we do share information, participants in the different studies. If they say, yes, I'm interested in PK, or I just want to stay with ESP, or no, I don't want to do anything else, then we respect that, and we'll move them along or not. So we do use them in other research. Can I have the girl right there? You've had your hand up the longest.
The participants in the video, they appear to experience the images, like they feel that they're going on the rocket. Instead of seeing, they don't say, I see somebody going on the
Exactly.
rocket. Did you ask them to place themselves in the scene that they saw? Did they do that automatically?
They did it automatically. I just asked people to report anything that came into their mind, including body sensations. And this girl said, I feel like I'm in. And people will report feeling jostled side to side, or rocking, or fear. I get a lot of, my stomach hurts, I'm frightened, that kind of thing. And what we do know is that targets with emotional charges do tend to be picked up better because it's more relevant to the organism. Neutral, bland targets aren't necessarily given the kind of response rate that makes them important for us. Psi may originally have been, and this is complete speculation on my part, Psi may have originally been a survival instinct for us that we use to pick up information that may be threatening to us or that we want to make use of. So at that level, it makes perfect sense that targets with emotional charges would do better for us in our research. Did you have your hand up?
Yes. Two things. What were your instructions for sending, for the sender? Was it two? I mean, you answered just now, in terms of actually sending the information.
Well, first of all, I always ask the sender and the receiver to talk about how they might like their information sent to them, what mode they picked up better. Some of us are very visual, some of us are very auditory, and some of us are very kinesthetic, and some of us like emotions. In addition, in the sender's room, I had a suggestion list. This has worked for other people. You may try this or you may not. And what we'd like for you to think about doing is immerse yourself in the target. Become the central object, the central thing. Experience it as much as possible. If it looks hot, try to feel hot. If it looks cold, feel cold. If you're afraid, if it looks like frightening, try to feel fear or happiness or sunshine or whatever's in there. Try to experience it as much as you can.
And then direct it to the person?
Yes.
The receiver?
Yes. And it was kind of, the ideal is a multi-sensory kind of information sending. So that the information's been sent on several levels. They were also asked to try different ways of sending that. Again, emotion or geometric shapes or color or motion on the screen, whatever. The sender was able to hear what the receiver said, but the receiver could hear nothing from anyone except for the sender when they said, okay, now I'm going to show you the 4 possible targets, cue the computer. Okay, so the receiver didn't get any information auditorily or anything, but the sender was able to hear what the receiver was saying. We set that up so that when the receiver was trying a specific way of sending, they'd know it was working because the receiver would start saying what they were sending. And that was pretty awesome. I had people at the end of it running down to the room and saying, you won't believe this, I was looking at this and then they said it, or I thought about this and then they said it, and oh my God, I looked at my shoe and then they said shoe, and I thought, I gotta stop looking at my shoes. So it was very exciting for them to experience it at the same time. And I think that level of excitement, again, kind of an adventure thing, really adding to the juice of the overall experiment. Oh, wait, Nikki, or was it separate, different people?
I was just wondering, in the case of the clip of, I think you said it was a mother and son duo, and she was like falling from the tower, and I suddenly realized that for some people this would be a very, like, frightening, unpleasant experience psychically. So I was just wondering how you handled that. You know,
Well, I monitor the people quite closely. And I've only ever had one participant in all the years I've been doing this, all the hundreds of trials, where I stopped it and said, please come out. You know, we're not doing this any further. She was frightened but not concerned. And by that I mean she was having all the physical reactions she would have to being at a great height. But she knew she wasn't at a great height. So while she was having the reactions to it, psychologically she felt very comfortable and secure over there. If she had, by her voice or the things that she was saying, indicated that she was distressed, I would have stopped the experiment at that point.
What happened in the case of the one that you did stop? What were the effects on that?
She burst into tears in the middle of this. And part of what was going on there, she just had a very traumatic breakup with a longtime fiance, had come into a sensory deprivation condition where the only thing on her mind was what had just transpired. She was unable to pick up anything about the target, but got into an emotional loop about everything that had just happened and just went to pieces in the gone field. So we shut the experiment down, and I went in and we spent a lot of time in there just talking and discussing, you know, emotions and men, life, and relationships. And then she left about an hour and a half later with cookies and tea. Sally.
I was just wondering if there was any attempt to differentiate within an art discipline, say between jazz musicians and classical, or poets versus fiction writers.
That's a good question. I was interested in that myself, and as much as I could, because again, I had what I still consider to be fairly small samples in terms of 32 in each group. I was interested whether people who play the piano versus people who play the guitar would do better, and whether people who wrote poetry would do better than people who wrote short fiction stories. All my writers were fiction writers. I had no tech writers. And whether sculptors would do better than painters, you know, that kind of thing. And actually, I didn't really find any strong correspondences with any of that. It seemed to be really no difference between the groups. I think if there was anything, it would be that people who played the piano did a little bit better, but nothing significant. Okay, you've had your hand up the longest in the room.
I'm just still puzzled by this musician thing. Maybe it's because I'm a writer. But because I think any artist has to go from the irrational to the rational world and what they put down. Certainly writing would be like that.
But most people don't get formal training doing that from an early age. So what we're looking at is the possibility of a brain structure, where it's just part of normal processes for them.
Right.
Whereas other people start learning that as they do their art more and more. Because it just gives them this least little bit of edge. And the other possibility is that they are intrinsically more psychic. I don't know.
They also, musicians, if they read notes, they're always translating notes into music. So they're doing a sort of dimensional translation constantly, so it might be more easier.
That could be, because you'd start writing at a very young age, you know.
Oh, that's true.
So I think that even more to do with that.
It's part of their art. Translation is part of their art.
Okay. You gave us these wonderful examples of the correspondences between the sender and receiver experience and mentation and their emotional involvement in it and how that leads to the performance. And you explained about the biological connection between the sender and receiver.
Which I find really interesting.
And I'm very impressed by this data. I've read some of the studies. It looks good to me. So would you care to address the implications of your no sender study, which is not the only one, by the way, there are others, right?
Yeah, there are. The remote viewing literature says you don't need a sender. The implications there for me is that, first of all, it's a very small study, and I wouldn't draw any strong conclusions from it anyway. I think that you should never ever use laboratory staff as the sender, because they're strangers. And part of what's going on in any situation where you're having information transmitted telepathically is the psychological comfort of the receiver. They're much more comfortable with people that they know and have a bond with and are open and receptive to. Secondly, the reason that we didn't let them know whether it was a sender or not is because we wanted to get around the psychological expectations. and we wanted to see if there was any added juice for just the sender. The added juice seemed to be when they knew there was a sender, and they were expecting that added information. There's also, I mean, if they're uncomfortable with the person who's sending, then they're just as likely to pick up the information clairvoyantly or possibly even precognitively from themselves. One of the studies in my mind down the road is to do a Ganzfeld where the target is chosen after the Ganzfeld is complete. It's a precognitive target. The person could only be picking up from themselves or from the target as it's shown in the future and look at a precognitive target for the Ganzfeld. And I'd like to use creative populations again. But I would also like to extend this. I mean, I've probably been the person to do most of the research on creativity in the field right now, but even now I feel that we haven't done enough. I mean, 2 or 3, 4 different groups. I want to expand that because I know that people who are in the sciences and have to come up with innovative ways of approaching research problems and even technical writers. You know, there's so many people out there who are creative, but who aren't by definition in a creative profession, that I want to explore how well they do in these kinds of situations. So I want to expand our population group to include those other
Our scientists right now.
Exactly.
Creative.
Oh, yeah, they must be. Okay.
And perhaps off camera, we can continue the discussion, but I thank you for coming and certainly would welcome you back anytime.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Lisette Coley. I'm president of Parapsychology Foundation, so welcome to our YouTube channel. We have lots to look at, so please check out our videos. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.